What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Blind Ace Disc Golf YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be walking you through casting of a couple of custom metal minis. This is also my first time using Petrobond, so I'm going to be doing a side-by-side of green sand and Petrobond, just using normal casting techniques. This one right here is the custom metal mini that I'll be doing. The other one that you see is just something that I threw together, since it's a lot easier to cast two side by side than it is to cast a single one by itself. First part's just normal, adding sand, hammering it out. Same thing right here, going through the normal green sand process, packing it in on the sides, making sure that the pieces aren't going to move. I have to pause right here and move something off the ramming table. There always seems to be something jiggling, shaking, making some noise on the ramming table. Just gets a little bit annoying for me, but it's a habit. I seem to do it every single time, so got to get that stuff out of the way. I wouldn't create a pattern board for something like this because I won't be creating multiple of these minis. I'm creating two. One is for the order, the other one's just to show a side-by-side with the Petrobond and to ensure that I get a good cast, since I have never used Petrobond before. You can see right here with the green sand, I actually have to hold the flask in place whenever I level out the top. That's an issue that you'll see later. I don't have with the Petrobond at all. Alright, once the top side of the cast is all done, go ahead and flip it over. Pretty comfortable flipping the green sand over. It seems to hold to the parts pretty decently, so it's not that big of a trouble. But with the pattern board, it is much easier. Put on a little bit of baby powder as parting dust and put the bottoms of the part together. After that, we'll add the bottom of the flask and repeat the same process. Add sand, hammer it in, add sand, hammer it in. On this side, you don't have to be so worried about the parts moving because they're attached to the top, the other halves, and those parts are held tightly in place by the green sand. So not so much hand packing is needed to ensure the parts that have a good place inside the flask. Again, scraping off the top, you can see that the flask wants to move around a little bit. It's a little bit easier on this side since there's more weight and sand inside the flask, but still seem to be dragging it around quite a bit. After I flip it over, I take a copper pipe, shove some holes down there. Made it a habit to put my parts in the same place every single time, so that when I flip it over, I always know where I can drive those holes in without hitting parts. Cut some little holes just to make it easier to pour in, a little wider area. And right here you can see how everything looks in the green sand. It seems to have taken pretty well to the pattern. No big flaws. There's no sand left on the top of the parts in the gaps or anything like that, so that's good. After that, take the holes made by the copper pipe, cut some gates, and dump out the parts. There's a little bit of cleanup involved in there, a lot of dusting and blowing out excess dirt. Pretty easy. I put the bottoms back in right here in order to keep the sand in place while I push a little logo into the bottom. And then that flask is ready to go. come over here to the Petrobond and repeat the process. Again, you can see I've got something on the table that just wants to rattle and shake around, and it annoys me, so I move it off to the side. Add Petrobond, hammer it in, add Petrobond, hammer it in. Same exact process as before. Although I did notice that the Petrobond hammers in tight much easier than the green sand. And when I'm scraping it off here, it slides through it like butter. There isn't any reason to hold the flask in place. There's no movement, and it makes a nice level surface really easily. I did have some trouble flipping the top part of the flask over. The parts were not held in as tightly by the Petrobond and wanted to move around, so I had to use a board underneath in order to flip it over. Same thing, using some baby powder as parting dust and placing the bottoms, pushing them into the holes, and getting ready to add the bottom of the flask. And back to normal casting process, just break it up, get a nice thin layer, make sure it's pushed into all the cracks and crevices so I don't have any extra flashing that I'm not going to want to take care of later. I did find out the hard way that with Petrobond, it's oil-based. Gloves are almost necessary. Without them, your hands will be orange for quite some time. It's pretty tough to get off. Flip the flask back over, and man, did the sprue cutter go in much easier into the Petrobond. It didn't take nearly so much pressure to push in and get those holes cut out, and it came out of the pipe much easier than the green sand. All around, the process for my first time seemed quite a bit easier to me. And you can see right there, I got very good patterns in the Petrobond. They look really nice, really sharp corners. And I also had an easier time pushing in the logo into the bottom. The Petrobond, all in all, seems to be quite a bit softer and still has a ton of green strength that holds together just fine. I didn't have any breakouts, any pieces missing, anything like that. During the pour right here, I had a little bit of trouble. I melted down some new aluminum pieces and just used too much aluminum. So on the green sand side of things, since I poured it second, it was a little bit of a cold pour. I didn't get a complete fill, and you'll be able to see that in the part coming up. Right here, when I break out the green sand, it's hard packed, the water's dried out of it, it's harder to break up, and it leaves, everything you don't break up leaves little clumps. If you look at the tote on the right here, you can see there's divots and pits in it, and that was because of pouring cold. Petrobond, on the other hand, the breakout is very easy. It comes out no problems. There's also some pitting on the toad there as well, and that was due to a little leak in the flask. Part of it just kind of leaked out. This is the side-by-side right here of the two pieces. You can see that the one on the right, that's the green sand piece. The little hole in the hat was due to a cold pour. Too much aluminum, and it didn't stay hot long enough. I should have reheated the aluminum before pouring the green sand. I let it get a little bit too cold, and when I poured it, it didn't completely fill the cast. All in all, I think that Petrobond is, for my first time, worked out great. I was pretty happy with how it all turned out. It was easy to use. Spent a lot less time building the flask and preparing it. I did notice that you need a board underneath to flip it over, in order to keep the parts from moving, because it doesn't hold as tight to the Petrobond as it does the green sand. It's definitely something I'll be doing in the future. The corners were sharp, everything looked nice, and there seemed to be much less risk of the Petrobond breaking out. It let go of the parts a lot easier. Thanks for checking out the video, and be sure to subscribe for more disc golf and casting related videos.